want you to imagine, and maybe you've been in this situation, that you live in an apartment building. You know, one of the apartment buildings that's got a hallway and doors coming in and out, kind of like a hotel. The doors go to the hallway, and there's a lot of shared property, right, in an apartment building like that. You have the common room downstairs. You've got the hallways, of course, maybe even some sitting areas along the hallways people can just hang out in. And the basement, of course, is where probably many residents have their stuff, that maybe even in storage. Some apartment buildings like that in the basement, they'll have little lockers with cages where you can kind of store some things and lock it. Imagine you live in one of those, and let's say it's winter. And as we do in the winter, we have a problem in the apartment building where the pipes freeze. And of course, we know how that goes. If you've ever been in that situation, it is not pretty. The pipes freeze and they bust and water starts to run out everywhere. And of course, everyone in the apartment building now, especially if they have stuff stored in the basement, it becomes a mess. And your water's running. Let's say it's running, right? And it's currently flooding, and all your neighbors are running out and they're going downstairs. And what do they say? 9 times out of 10, what would you expect? Well, so-and-so was taking too many showers. Or, you know, if you had looked, Mr. Building Manager, if you had looked at these pipes, I told them this was going to happen a year ago. And everybody starts pointing fingers. Meanwhile, the water is still pouring out all over all your stuff. Oh, what? No one is jumping in to help. Nobody's looking for a wrench to shut the water off. No one is calling the company and saying, hey, we got to turn the water main off or everything's getting flooded. No, they're standing around pointing fingers. This is exactly what tends to happen in a winter season, according to Strauss-Howe. We're going to talk about some of that coming up and hopefully find out how we can learn to be good neighbors who go for the wrench when the water is pouring down all over everything. Maybe we can look out for one another in the midst of it. It's so easy to get lost in the noise, to be consumed by the outrage, the anger, and the constant hum of fear. But if you look past the chaos, you find a landscape of raw mechanics and hard truths, the things that don't change, even when everything else is on fire. I'm Jared Lee. I don't focus on the friction of the moment. I'm looking at the wider ground that makes the struggle inevitable. This is the whole field of battle. Thanks for joining me again today. I appreciate your involvement. I appreciate your ears, and thanks for the time. I know that I talk about a lot of different things, and hopefully together we can gain a picture of what we can understand and, more importantly, what we can do if this theory, the Strauss-Howe theory, proves to be right, and if in 10 years the world is on a new high and looking up. Those of us that are sitting here listening to this today and have been following along, we will have played a role in moving us into a better day. But it bears talking a little bit about the winter season, because we're going to live through that as well. We have been living through that, if Strauss and Howe are right. And the climax is coming. And, you know, as I'm recording this, we've just now gone to war with Iran. By the time you're listening to it, I don't know what that situation will be. Will China and Russia jump in? Will this turn into a world war? People have asked me that, and I don't know. No one can predict the future. Here's one thing I can tell you. In 1914, I believe it was, when Gavrilo Princip shot the Archduke Ferdinand, nobody would have thought that would turn into a global war. It wasn't even on anybody's radar at that moment in time, and yet it did. And so who can say? Hopefully we don't have to walk through that together, but We may walk through something and we don't know what it'll be. But whatever we walk through, it's important that we walk through it together with a little bit of context. And so that's what I'm doing. I'm trying to give us a little bit of context and understanding. And I thought today, we would talk a little bit about what we can have a tendency to do to each other in a winter season. It's not, if you've been with me this long, you'll know that according to Strauss-Howe, the winter season is not about cold weather. It's about cold hearts. It's about a frozenness in society, in trust, in faith, in one another, in our institutions. We've talked about these things, and here we are, and it also has to do with paranoia. We ignore each other. Who can be trusted? Nobody can be trusted, and we obsess over the fact that other people are a threat to us, right? The institutions, we've talked about the institutions, they stop working. They stop making us feel safe. In fact, if anything, they make us feel a little more afraid. That's what happens when institutions move from serving the mission for which they were created, serving the people that they were made to serve, for caring for what they're supposed to be about. They stop doing that, and they start preserving themselves. And of course, when that happens, they become untrustworthy. That's why you hear about all these great scandals. And we have talked about some of this stuff. And when that happens, there is a tendency to turn in on each other. And that's what I want to talk about a little bit today. I want to talk about it in light of Russian history a little bit. If you'll bear with me, I think it's a fascinating study to examine what happened in the Soviet Union during their most recent winter. And they were pretty much on track with us. Now, Strauss and Howe, and I've kind of addressed this a little bit, but they talk about a civilizational more than sort of a national movement according to these cycles. And so while many parts of the world might have had and cultures have been very divided and separated in the past, and they've gone through these cycles somewhat independently of one another, that has been syncing up more and more as the world has become more and more globalized. And in their previous winter, they were aligned in many ways with the West. So the timing is right. Their crisis and climax was the same as ours. It was World War II. But their crisis period, also the same as ours, crossed most of the 30s and into the mid 40s. It was synced up with ours, but it looked very differently. Very different from ours. See, what happened to them, because in their previous awakening, right? The awakening is the time where Strauss and Howe, I think it's fair to say it's sort of it's not unfair to think of it as a spiritual awakening from a high, right? Everything seems to be going well, but then there becomes this moment at the end of a high where the people start thinking, yes, but there's more. There's something else. There's something missing. And their awakening was what we know of as the Bolshevik Revolution. It was when they came to a point and they said, the Tsar is part of our problem. It was brutal. It was bloody. It was catastrophic what they did. Go watch Anastasia. You'll see some of that. Things were not pretty, but that was part of what their awakening season looked like, was that revolution. And then it was led by these great sort of prophet types. That's what Strauss and Howe would name this generation. The Lenin, Trotsky, right? These guys whose names you might have heard, they led this new movement, and people began to be excited that this new thing was going to change their lives, right? This new thing that they called the Soviet Union, and it didn't. And all the stuff underneath the surface was falling apart. The pipes had busted, right? But they were, out of an awakening, they were so deeply committed to the ideology of their awakening, which for them was communism. And so that can't be the problem, right? So When things start working, essentially the machinery gets old, needs to be replaced. We, during our phase, America, during that same phase, we were going through the Great Depression, right? There was a global problem with building and development and infrastructure, and all of this stuff had happened, all of which the communist ideology in the Soviet Union was supposed to solve the problem. And the problem was still there under the surface. Their infrastructure was literally falling apart. Their mass plans for farms that would be collective and feed everyone, and the infrastructure to deliver all of that wasn't working. It just didn't work the way it was supposed to work. But to say that would have been admitting that the ideology was failing. It would be admitting that the problem is the ideology, and the ideology could not be a problem for the Soviet Union. And so you have Stalin, who was what same generation that we called our greatest generation. They were the heroes in the Strauss-Howe cycle, the people who lead right through this. And he said, well, we've got to find a way to solve this problem. It can't be about the Soviet system. It has to be about the people. It has to be about the people. The people are the problem. And so they looked for the engineers who built the infrastructure, the mechanics who were supposed to maintain the equipment. They said, if this stuff's not working, it has to be because you are not loyal to the ideology. And so they put out calls. And they said, well, there's 10 factory workers there, and that factory doesn't seem to be producing the way it's supposed to be producing. So someone in that factory is opposed to the great Soviet ideology. So you better tell us who, or we're going to kill you all. I'm not making this up. This isn't even a metaphor. This is exactly what happened. And what you do in that system, you point your finger at someone else. You blame other people. This happened in a couple of different ways. There was one factory where it happened. There was a farm. There were multiple farms in the Ukraine area where they literally surrounded the whole collective farm with military, didn't let anyone out and didn't let any food in, and essentially starved everyone to death. During that time when they were doing that, stealing a handful of grain was punishable by death or 10 years in Siberia because you were committing a crime against the people if you were to do something like that. And so I've been in Eastern Europe, and I've seen these spaces where it's quite sobering, frankly. It's devastating to see this. But whole fields, I mean, probably I stood in a space that was probably as big as 10 football fields, and there were these sinkholes all around, deep ones, 15, 20 feet. You could walk down. It was grass, and it was just it would slope down, and they were all over in this whole area, many acres large, that all of these sinkholes that had been sunken were filled with bodies. It's rumored, we don't have good records, but it's rumored that as many as 35 million people died in the Soviet Union because of these things where the system was broken. The pipes were leaking, and the people, rather than trying to fix the problem, rather than grabbing wrenches, rather than shutting the water off, rather than admitting that they just needed to solve the problem, rather than any of that stuff, they just pointed the finger at each other, and they threw their bodies in a hole. And 80, 90 years later, those holes are still there as reminders of what happens when we begin to think we can't depend on one another, and the problems that we have must be someone else's fault. It's important to remember that the problems that we have, generally, according to Strauss-Howe, the problems that we have in a winter season are because the things that were built in the previous high are simply failing now. They don't work anymore. the systems, the banking, the institutions, the the structures of society and organization that we built in the 1950s simply no longer work for us. And this is the whole core of their theory. And yet, when these things begin to fail, we keep trying to pretend that they're good enough while blaming one another because, the system seems to be failing. It must be your fault that the system is failing because the system is supposed to be working just fine. That's what happens. That's what happened then. And they killed at least 35 million of their neighbors because the system was failing and because someone had to take the fall for it. That is very sobering. It hits me especially hard when I think about what we have lived through just in the last, say, decade. I mean, there's been stories of people sending a probably somewhat thoughtless or careless tweet, getting on a plane and landing, and by the time they land, they've lost their job. They've been completely canceled. The mass amounts of hatred that can be heaped upon a person. There's been stories of someone tweeted something 15 years ago that they would not even agree with anymore, and absolutely losing everything because of something they said a decade and a half ago that today they'd say, no, I don't even believe that. But we don't forgive. We hold that grudge and we demand not just apology, but we demand penance. We demand retribution. We demand punishment. And all of this makes me think. I mean, this is a terrible question, but I have to ask because I think of those Russian citizens who pointed the finger at their coworkers, their neighbors, their friends and family in some cases. And I've just got to ask, how long, what would it take? What would it take for you to be willing to ship off your neighbor to a concentration camp? Be willing to turn your neighbor into the Secret Service? Would it be the flag that they fly in front of their house? Would it be a sign on their lawn? Would it be a Facebook status post that they drop, or maybe a comment that they leave on someone else's post? When you get realigned so much according to your own ideology, and my ideology, whatever that ideology might be, will solve the problem, right? What's the problem? The problem is everything seems to be falling apart. The problem is our whole society doesn't seem to be operating the way we wish it would. And I think I can speak universally to that. Our machinery might be working for now, but our institutions seem to be failing us. Our government structure seems to not quite be working, right? Things aren't going the way we wish they would, so you must be the problem, right? You want a different structure than I want. Think about it. That's what we're seeing in our society. This is why, I think I've named this before in this podcast. This is why people who voted for Trump and against Trump or whatever have stopped talking to one another. What would it take for you to be willing to put a Trump voter on a truck headed for some camp in Colorado? What would it take for you to put, the Democrat voter, Kamala or Biden or whoever they were voting for, to put them on a truck and ship them off to a camp somewhere? At what point do they become less than you? We think to ourselves, oh gosh, no, never. I would never do that. But people have many, many times over. Study a little bit of history and you'll find that it literally took a plane crash to set Rwanda on fire and a DJ on the radio saying one little comment that turned out not to be true, right? And it sparked a 90-day massacre in Rwanda in 1996. What would it take for that anger and that fear of the other to drive us over the edge? We are living in some ways, in our day and age, we are living like the Soviets did through the 30s and into the 40s, where things are falling apart, and rather than going to get a wrench, we're pointing fingers at each other. The water is pouring out in the basement, and we're not trying to solve the problem. We're looking for someone to blame. That doesn't work. In fact, I would argue compliance with an ideology doesn't work, because we have yet to discover as human beings, I don't think, a ideology that will sustain a civilization. I don't think we found it. Obviously we haven't found it, because they keep needing to be realigned just a little bit, right? But if we have tolerance for people who view things a little differently, and if we listen to one another, we might actually find that not all of our ideas are exactly right. Maybe that person that I would actually throw on the back of a truck might actually have some things I could learn from. I wonder if we could do that. But we'd have to not be afraid of each other. We'd have to not be, here's the key. Here's the real crucial key. And this is, I think, the heartbeat of why I'm doing this podcast in the first place. We have to not be so committed to our ongoing stability. This is the problem with the winter season. We think that we've had it right. And in having it right, anyone who threatens to not do it the way we did it 20 years ago is a problem for us, right? Whatever that is. That was the issue in the Soviet Union. Things were falling apart, and rather than solve the problem, because solving the problem always requires one thing that people do not like at all, it requires change. Things have to adjust, and nobody wants to change anything. No, we'd rather go back than forward. I know the world of yesterday. I understand the world of yesterday. The world of yesterday makes sense to me. It felt safe. Yeah, but it's gone. I'm not advocating for change. I'm advocating for reality. The Soviets needed to change some things. They needed to buy new tractors. They needed to build better roads. They needed to change some things. But rather than saying, here's what we can do to make the changes, they pointed the finger at people who must be the problem. Who are you pointing the finger at? Who is it that you look at and go, you're the reason we're in this mess? Is somebody in your tribe has told you, this is the problem, and you've come to agree with that. That's the problem. We all do that because we're all afraid. We're all afraid of change. We're all afraid of hard work, aren't we? We're a little afraid to actually get our hands dirty. None of us want to walk down in knee-deep water in the basement with a pipe wrench in our hands. We'd rather stand on the second floor and yell at each other. But it's time for us to make a decision. It's time for us to decide if we're willing to get our hands dirty together, or if we're just going to throw the people who we want to blame on the back of a truck. Here's a dirty little secret that I don't think you want to hear, but it's the truth. You can throw every resident of the apartment complex on the back of a truck, and you can ship them away. The pipes are still going to be overflowing. The basement's still going to flood. So that leaves us with a question. What are we going to do about that? I remember, I remember reading about Abraham Lincoln. Near the start of the Civil War, he gave a speech where he called on the people to listen to their better angels. And I have often thought about He coined that phrase, our better angel, the better angels of our nature. And yet, I think we have a choice. We have the darker angels of our nature, and we have the better angels of our nature. And that was a serious climax moment, according to Strauss-House viewpoint, when he spoke to people. He was calling on them to listen to the better angels of their nature. We tend to want to listen to the darker angels of our nature. We want to listen to the parts of our souls that demand compliance and demand justice and demand condemning people who we would like to blame for the problems that we are in. These are the darker angels. If we could just see blood, then we'd feel better. But the truth is we wouldn't, because the basement's still going to get flooded and we're still going to lose our stuff. But our neighbor, who we'd like to blame for the problem, is also interested in solving the problem. They'd like to save their stuff too. They'd like to stop the basement from flooding. This is the beauty, really, of grace. This is what I try constantly to call people toward, to look to someone who you disagree with, the person who you would maybe in a pinch, if we're honest with ourselves, maybe in a pinch we'd be willing to put them on the back of a truck and ship them off to nowhere. Think about it, because I'm sure many of us can think of, if not a person, certainly a group. It's a little easier, right, to think about a group of people, because there's no face to that, than an individual that maybe lives across the street or down the road or maybe goes to your church. But if we think of that group of people, just think of them, that you might in a pinch be willing to put them on the back of a truck and never see them again till maybe they're memorialized in a sinkhole somewhere in an open field. It's a horrible thought. It's a tragic thought. And it's a deeply human one. Because this is the story of humanity. This is a story that we repeat over and over and over. And think about those people. Think about that group. Try to pick out an individual if you can. And I want you to ask, what motivates them? I mean, truly, what drives them to hold views or opinions that are so deeply different from yours and maybe threatening to yours? What makes them feel that way? Usually one of those drivers is fear. Fear of loss, fear of maybe being thrown on the back of a truck and driven out to the woods, potentially. I'm not saying whether that's legitimate or not. I think it's deeply legitimate, quite honestly, because I know what's in the human soul. And I don't know who's at risk of being thrown on the truck, but I think in a winter season, 35 million people went out on the last one. It's just a fact. You can scoff. Go ahead. If you scoff, I don't know if you really understand the depths of how much fear can drive the human heart. Think about that person. Are they afraid? Are they scared? Do they want something out of their future, or their kids' future, or their grandkids' future, that something that maybe your team stands for causes them to think that they won't be able to get it? It's not either or here. It doesn't have to be. It can be that can help us lean into grace, to say, I understand. You don't have to agree. Seek to understand. Try to have grace. Look for the people that can carry the wrench, right? Maybe they don't agree with you, but maybe we can agree on some of the bigger problems. Institutions falling apart. We don't trust each other, right? The economy is struggling. Maybe that's something that we can agree on, and something needs to be done. Maybe, wouldn't it be beautiful for the Trump voter and the whatever the equivalent on the other side, right? Because they're there. Um, wouldn't it be beautiful if two of those people get together and plant a garden together and tend it so that they can feed their neighbors? I think, generally speaking, people in both of those camps care about people, want to provide. They just have different ways of going about it. I'll bet you we can find ways to pick up the wrench together and shut off the water together who care about these things, who can do it, who have the skills. One of the things they did in the Soviet Union when this happened, part of the reason things actually got worse, part of the reason the Soviet Union actually didn't survive, I mean, we could talk about ideology all day long, but part of the problem was they literally killed everybody who had any good skills. Oh, the factory stopped working because it's rusting and falling in around itself. Go kill all the employees. This is the way it went. It's not always the best way to prep the next generation, is it? Who around us has skills that we might need to build a new world together? Let's try to find grace for them. Let's try to listen and ask ourselves, what are they actually good at? What are the skills, the gifts, the talents that these people have that I can lean on and learn from? Because the way I see it, we honestly have a choice. We have a choice as we navigate the winter season together. We have a choice. And that is that we either care for one another, offer one another grace, listen to one another, and work together to build a new world out of the wreckage of the old one. Like, that's a choice. I suppose our other choice is we take the ones we don't agree with and we put them on the back of the truck. Now, maybe that's extreme, but I'm not always so sure it is. I studied a lot of history, and I will tell you that it seems to me more often than not, that seems to be the solution that people choose. I don't think that's what we want to do. I don't think that's what anybody wants to do. I don't think there's anybody out there advocating for putting anybody on trucks yet. And I say that with deep humility, but I know the way we tend to treat one another. And I just don't think that's what any of us really want. And I would say I think we can begin to talk about ways to stop that now. And that begins with listening. We need to learn to listen to each other. We need to learn to care for one another. What if I told you that's your choice? Listen to each other, think about what drives one another, care for one another, or just put each other on the back of a truck and ship them off. Because I feel like what I've seen in the last decade is a modified version of that. I really do. We have literally cut off relationships from each other. Families have been torn apart over what you did in a voting booth. I mean, it's utterly ridiculous. It is absolutely insane. And yet, it's exactly what happens in a winter season. We lose trust. We stop listening. And eventually, sometimes, we ship them off to the woods to never see them again. But we could listen. We could listen. We could try to find out, how can I love you and how can I care for you? That's what I'm begging. That's what I'm begging you to do. Dear listener, if you are listening to me right now, here is the challenge that I would offer you. Knowing the depths of, I'm going to just use the word wickedness that humanity can descend to. Sometimes at the drop of a hat, take Rwanda, plane crash, DJ, murder of 6 million people, I think. If I got that number right, I don't know. It was about that. That can't be good, right? But it happens. It happens all the time. So knowing that, Do you want to continue to keep people at arm's length? Do you continue to hate people for a sign in their yard or a Facebook post? Or do you want to ask them questions? That's my challenge to you. Find someone that maybe you've kept at arm's length the last decade. Maybe who you know their position, so you'd rather not talk to them. And ask them questions. Don't push, don't challenge, don't try to get them to do not try to get them to agree with you. Okay? But ask them why they feel the way they do about the things that they feel that way about. Just get them to explain and listen. I know what I'm asking. I'm asking us to listen to each other in a winter season where we are politically isolated and ideologically motivated in ways that are absolutely destroying our souls. And I think burning down our civilization as well. But I'm asking you to listen because I'm telling you, what if your choice is listen or murder? What if that's your choice? Would you be willing to listen then? Because here's my thesis. And I think it's the thesis of human history. I think it's been proven over and over and over and over again. Failure to listen tends to lead to murder. Am I saying that's going to happen in the United States of America over the next 5 years? No, I'm not saying that. Am I saying it could? I'm afraid I am. I am saying it could happen. Again, please don't write me and tell me that I am a fearmonger. I'm just telling you what humanity has taught us, what human history has shown us over and over and over again. What I have said in 1924, that Stalin would murder 35 million people through institutional program of execution like that? No way. Nobody would have thought that would happen. Wouldn't even probably have been able to tell in 1929, 1930 that the Jews would kill 6 million people. It became slowly apparent that that was not a good situation, but even when it got bad, they still never expected that. Could you have told in 1990 that the Rwandan crisis would be what it was? No way. You can't, no. These things don't, they creep up, man. They creep up. And often, in all those, in every one of those examples that I just cited and others, the choice was listen to one another or kill each other. That was the choice. Am I saying that that's our only binary choice right now? No, I'm not. I'm not saying that. I'm not saying that we're going to do that. But if history is going to be our teacher, I think we better listen. I think we need to find a way to listen to each other. That's my serious challenge to you this week. Identify something that's been in the news. They change them. The news changes about every 72 hours, every 3 to 5 days. It's some new thing for you to be upset about. But usually the teams around the thing that they're upset about are usually the same teams. Find somebody who's on the other team. All I hear when something blows up and the news goes crazy and people, get on their teams and start lining up against the ball, it's always the same teams. All I hear is, it's your fault the pipe's busted. It's their fault the pipe's busted. No, it's their fault the pipes are busting. That's all I ever hear. And I often think that I try to come at that with a little bit of like, hey, everybody. I want to be a referee. I want to be an umpire in it. I don't want to. I'm not. I don't want to defend either side. I want to ask both sides. Hey, can we have a conversation? Would you listen to each other? And better yet, hey, how about let's grab a wrench and go close the water valve? Can we do that? And I'm going to tell you something that I don't talk about a lot, but I mean, I feel like I have gotten attacked by both sides in these terrible culture wars worse than the other sides, because I'm just asking people to listen. So I release this, and I'm still going to have to think about whether or not I'm going to drop this on the feed so that you can even get this episode. Because as I'm talking, I am terrified. I am terrified that everyone is going to hate me for saying, can we listen to each other? But it's because that's been my experience for about the last before COVID hit. My experience has been a non-stop slaughter of people attacking me. I went totally silent on Facebook for a long time because everything I said, people were mad at, and people from all perspectives were mad at me. Because all I'm asking is that we could stop blaming one another, stop pointing fingers at each other, and try to listen to each other, and see if we can grab a wrench and maybe even work together to make the world a better place. I really think we can. I truly believe we can. I also believe we can fail to do that and kill each other. I do. I believe that too. I'll tell you, I'm rooting for one. I am rooting for us learning to listen to each other, learning to offer one another grace, giving each other time to talk. And I know from experience that when you have that conversation, you go, oh, I mean, I don't agree with you, but I understand why you would feel that way. That must be scary. And that just brings such life and freedom. You know, somebody once told me, actually I forget where I heard this now, I don't know, hating someone and not forgiving them is like drinking poison and expecting it to kill the other person. We are so locked in hatred and fear and animosity toward one another in our culture right this very moment that it's killing us all. And I'm absolutely 100% convinced that if we could learn to let go of that, we could actually individually find a whole lot more peace, comfort, and hope. And I think as a society, we actually could find a whole lot more love and understanding for one another. Anyway, that's it for today. I hope to hear from you. If you have questions, thoughts, input, pushback, I'll take your pushback. I've already addressed some of it. If you think I didn't address it faithfully enough, go ahead. Please let me know. I'd love to hear what you think. You can always reach out to me on Substack. You can comment there. You can email me. I also, if you are just listening to the audio feed, the last couple of episodes, I have recorded video and dropped them on my YouTube page. It's Jared M. Lee Official on YouTube. Feel free to check me out there as well, and I'd love to connect with you. And you know, I'm not even pretending to be doing this whole thing very perfectly. In fact, it's been somewhat scattershot, taking topic from topic to topic. We will do a couple of more episodes on using Strauss-Howe theory. I've been thinking a lot about what it might look like to lead a church or organization through the climax and into a new high. And so I might do a drop of a episode or a longer extended thing. I don't know yet. After 8 episodes of this on leading organizations through the climax period and into a high, because I've been thinking a lot about that just personally, because that's what I do. And I want to find the right way to kind of navigate this season as an institution that is missional and focused on, and keeping us focused on what we're supposed to be doing and not self-protecting. I think there's all these things to think about. So I'm going to be doing that as well. And if you need to check that out, you can. And then I'm going to be taking a break after that a little bit. And I think I'm reading up on some books now to think through another large picture, sort of understanding of history, but also the days through which we are living together. I'm enjoying sort of taking this top level, big picture thinking, and oh look, this has happened before, and And here we are in this, and trying to think of the ways that we can retain our humanity. That seems to be the thing that I am most committed to, is how do we retain our humanity and live full and complete and fulfilling human lives in the days in which we currently live. That seems to be the thing that is catching my attention in this podcast. I want us to be as fulfilled as we possibly can. I want us to live well in spite of the days that we live in. And I think there's some ways we can do that. And so we'll be talking about more of that in future episodes. But in the meantime, I hope you are subscribed. Spotify, Apple, Substack, whatever you want. Check me out on YouTube. You can watch videos there as well. And connect with me. I'd love to hear any of your thoughts as you think through these things. And if I don't cover something well, ask me and I'll try to get to it. I might even do an Ask Me Anything in the mid-season break too. We'll see. Anyway, I hope you are having a great day, and I hope you are thinking about how you can live your life in this period, in this climax, crisis moment through which we're living right now, in ways that bring goodness to the world. And I do hope that this week, before the next episode drops, I hope you will find a way to have a conversation with somebody that you don't necessarily agree with, and try to understand them and give them just a little bit of grace and a little understanding. I'm Jared. I'm checking out. Have a great day.